In this class, we'll frequently deal with vectors. Here's an example, r vector. I'm showing it relative to a coordinate system, x hat, y hat, and z hat. R has three components as shown in the Cartesian coordinate system here, an x component, a y component, and a z component. And these different components can be thought of as the shadows that the vector would cast on that basis vector if you were to shine a light perpendicular to the basis vector. So for example, if I shone a light perpendicular to the z hat vector, the length of the shadow the r vector would cast on z hat, that represents the z component of the r vector. There are several different ways to express a vector, in this case in the Cartesian coordinate system. Below the coordinate system here is one way, so that's r vector is equal to x the scalar times x hat the vector, plus y the scalar times y hat the vector, plus z the scalar times z hat the vector. This is equivalent to writing x comma y comma z all in parentheses. You can also equate a basis vector e1 hat to x hat, e2 hat to y hat, and e3 hat to z hat, and then you can write the r vector as r1 times e1 hat plus r2 times e2 hat plus r3 times e3 hat. And then finally you can save yourself the effort of writing out each of those terms and just write the r vector using a summation symbol. It's important to keep in mind that vectors can interact with one another just as scalars can interact with one another via binary operations. However, vectors transform under binary operations in a very different way from scalars. So here, for example, I've got the r vector and the s vector, and we're going to apply different binary operations between the two vectors. For instance, the vectors can be added together, and in this case, each of the x, y, and z components add separately. And so r vector plus s vector is equal to a vector where the x component is the sum of the two x components, the y component is the sum of the two y components, and then the z component is the sum of the two z components. So it's as if each of the components doesn't know about any of the other components when you're adding two vectors together. This fact is really important because it means that the vectors add in a different way from scalars. So for example, if the letter r and the letter s represent the magnitude or length of the r and s vectors respectively, the sum of the magnitudes r plus s is not the same thing as the sum of the vectors r and s. Those two things are not the same. You can also multiply a vector by a scalar. So in this case, I'm multiplying the vector r by the number c, and this has the effect of just increasing each of the components x, y, and z for the r vector by a factor of c. So for example, if I multiply the vector r by the number 2, that has the effect of lengthening the vector r, making it twice as long. And so that means each of the components, x, y, and z, are now twice as long in the new vector as they were in the original vector. There are two ways in this class that we'll multiply vectors by one another. One of them is called the dot product. So here I've got vectors r and s, and I'm expressing them in the Cartesian coordinate system x, y, and z. The dot product of r with s is simply the sum of the products of each of the components for the vectors. So r dotted into s will be r1 s1 plus r2 s2 plus r3 s3. And it turns out that this is actually equivalent to the product of the magnitudes for the two vectors, r and s, times the cosine of the angle theta between the two vectors. This relationship is particularly convenient when you need to calculate the magnitude of a vector. So if you dot a vector into itself, then of course the angle theta between a vector and itself is 0, cosine of 0 is 1, and so r dotted into itself will actually just be the magnitude of the vector r squared. That'll come in handy frequently whenever we do problems where you need the magnitude of the vector. This is in contrast with the other way in which you can multiply vectors by one another, called the cross product. So in this case, I've written an equation. A new vector p is the cross product of r with s. And to calculate the cross product between two vectors, I find that it's convenient to write the two vectors as column vectors. So now I have all three components of the r vector written in a column, crossed into all three components of the s vector written as a column. And then to calculate the components of the p vector, I use the cross product between these two column vectors. Okay, so for example, the x component, or the first component of the p vector, is r2 times s3 minus r3 times S2. And you can say that here, R2 S3 minus R3 S2. The y component, or the second component of the p vector, is minus R1 times S3 plus R3 times S1. And you can see that here, negative R1 S3 plus R3 S1. And then finally, the last component is going to be the product involving the other two components, R1 times S2 minus R2 times S1. Here are the useful properties of the cross product. When you take a cross product between two vectors, the vector that comes out is a vector that's perpendicular to the two operands. So in this case, R and S vector, I've drawn them as being in the page here, and the resultant P vector points out of the page. So P is orthogonal to both R and S. We can show that P is orthogonal to R and S by taking the dot product of R with P or S with P. Recall that the dot product between two vectors is equal to the magnitudes of the two vectors times the cosine of the angle between them. And so when we have two vectors that are orthogonal to one another, that angle is 90 degrees. So you get the cosine of 90, which is 0. And so if we calculate the dot product term by term, we get an expression that looks like this. If we distribute across the parentheses, what we find is that for each term with a positive sign, we get an equal and opposite term, and so R dotted into P works out to be exactly 0. S dotted into P would also be 0, but I'm not going to show it here. Another useful property of the cross product, if you take the magnitude of R cross S, what you get is the products of R and S's magnitudes times the sine of the angle between them. And this is analogous to the dot product's relationship to the cosine of the angle between R and S. We'll also take some time derivatives of vectors. And so in this case, we take the time derivative of the vector R. That's defined to be the limit as delta t goes to 0 of delta R vector, so the displacement between 2 points in time, divided by the time delta t. And you can think about that graphically like this. So there's a vector R of t that might represent the position of some particle at some time t. At some later time t plus delta t, that point might be located at R of t plus delta t. And then there's a displacement vector, delta R vector, which just represents the difference between those two position vectors. And so the derivative is just defined to be the limit for that displacement vector as the times between the two vectors go to 0. The time derivative just applies to each component of R individually, and so the time derivative of position vector R is just a vector with the velocity components x, y, and z as each of the components. The time derivative is a linear operator, and so that means that when you take the time derivative of the sum of two vectors, that's the same as the sum of the two vectors' time derivatives. Again, you can think about that graphically with this illustration. So here I've got the vector r of t and the vector r of t plus delta t, and I'm showing the same thing for the vector s. I've got the two displacement vectors, delta r vector, delta s vector. I can add those two displacement vectors up, so I get delta r vector plus delta s vector. That gives me that pink vector. And then when I want to take that time derivative, I'm just going to divide that summed displacement vector by delta t and take the limit as delta t goes to 0. Remember that we can multiply a vector by a scalar, and in some cases the scalar that we're using might actually depend on time itself. And so we can take the time derivative of the product of a scalar f with a vector r. Remember that multiplying a scalar by a vector really just means you take that scalar and multiply it by each component of the vector one at a time. And so when we apply a time derivative to this, we find, just using the chain rule, we get an expression that looks like this. So the first column vector on the left, that just has the time derivative of f in it multiplied by the x, y, and z components. And then the second component of the vector is just the number f times the time derivatives of each of the components of the vector. And so it turns out that the time derivative of the product of a scalar with a vector is just equal to the time derivative of that scalar times the vector plus the scalar times the time derivative of that vector. We'll often deal with time in classical mechanics. Fortunately, unlike relativity, all observers in classical mechanics see exactly the same time. We'll also deal with reference frames frequently in classical mechanics, and as we'll see, the connections between reference frames can be quite complicated, but we can often use a choice reference frame to simplify a problem.